This is Tracie Decker, and you're listening to Deep Thoughts About Stupid Shit. Because pop culture is still culture, and shouldn't you know what's in your head? Today, I'll be sharing my deep thoughts about the 1994 film Reality Bites with my sister, Emily Guy Birken, and with you. Let's dive in. Have you ever had something you love dismissed because it's just pop culture? What others might deem stupid shit, you know matters. You know it's worth talking and thinking about. And so do we. So come overthink with us as we delve into our deep thoughts about stupid shit. Okay, so I know you remember the movie because we just did a little huddle up right before we hit record, but remind me what you remember about this movie and how you first encountered it, if you remember. I think you do.
So I believe the first time I saw it was when I had surgery on my feet when I was 15. I had one foot and then the other. It was minor. It was skin surgery, but still I couldn't walk. So that would have been in 1994. It was like sometime around August 1994. And I remember that you got this movie and a couple others from Blockbuster. And we set up the TV and VCR in my bedroom, and we laid on my bed and watched it together. And as I recall, you and I both liked it so much, we watched it more than once during that recovery period. So I had a similar relationship to this movie as I did to The Breakfast Club, in that it was about people who were a little bit older than I was. And I took it to mean that this is what I had to look forward to. So that's what I thought being in my 20s was going to be like when I was 15, looking forward. I remember that I loved the love story, and in my early 20s, sometime in the early 2000s, around 2001, 2002, a friend of mine said, yeah, that movie is proof that the asshole always gets the girl. And I was like, what are you talking about? My friend, having said that, made me kind of reevaluate the love triangle in the story. Don't know if that's when I first started, but it got me thinking about how often stories present the brooding jerk as like the romantic hero, and how much I have been like funneled into believing that that's, I can make him happy. So that was something that's kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. And I don't think that I have revisited the film since then. So that would have been about 20 years ago or a little more. And then there are a couple of things that stand out from that film. Most obviously, the My Sharona scene. It just feels, it's iconic. It's an iconic scene. And it feels very Gen X in a way that makes me feel like I was born in 1979, so I'm very much on the cusp of Gen X and millennials. I self-identify as Gen X, and that scene is one of the things that makes me like proud to be a Gen Xer, even though I have a relatively loose claim on it. So tell us, why are we talking about this film today?
Yeah, so if we watched it in August of 94, that was like right before I went away to college. And this film, it's funny, I agree with you that this sits in a similar spot to The Breakfast Club, which is the last movie that I brought to you. And I think that's probably why I put them in succession like this in my own kind of exploration. And there's 9 years between them. And so I was closer to the age of Reality Bites than I was to the kids in Breakfast Club, at least when it was released initially. But I think, like you, they sort of were like, this is what it's going to be like, and very close for me for Reality Bites. And more so than The Breakfast Club, like in The Breakfast Club, we talked about the fact that there wasn't a character with whom I was like, that's me. I so completely identified with Winona Ryder's Lelaina that in my mind, like, Winona Ryder was my Hollywood persona. She was like, if there was ever a movie of my life, Winona was going to play me, like she was the polished, prettier version of me. And so there was this self-identification that actually became completely divorced from the movie itself in some ways. Well, not completely, because I still understood that Reality Bites, but it was what it got built up to in my brain. Now that I've just rewatched it in order to prepare to talk to you, they weren't the same. They weren't like in the 30 years or however, like it definitely like evolved in my brain.
Mhm,
I don't
mhm,
even know if I remembered the character's name prior to
mhm,
rewatching it. I didn't. But there was something like deeply self-identified in this movie. So what we were missing in Breakfast Club was the overachieving, kind of nerdy, if you will, female character.
mhm, mhm,
Lelaina is the valedictorian of her graduating class in college. And at one point, when she's feeling down on herself because she thought she was going to do something by the time she was 23, which looking back, and I'm like, oh, honey. but
that
but that was
resonated with
real.
yes, I felt that
Yeah,
at
that was
15,
real. That
and
was real.
yeah, yeah.
So that's why I wanted to talk about it. That was this like formative character that I really self-identified with and aspired to in a certain way.
Mhm,
And so, thinking about our project, I wanted to go back and look at like what are those building blocks that I was putting into my aspirations that I was seeing myself resonance in. And your friend was right. Like I don't love it.
mhm,
Looking back on
mhm.
it, I do not love it. Winona Ryder, adorable. In fact, I felt validated. I was in the middle of the film and my spouse walked in and was like, "Oh, she's like a younger version of you." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I think so too."
Married you for
You
this
know,
very moment.
right, right. But Lelaina makes some really poor choices
Mhm,
and she's just completely predictably 47-year-old Tracie does not think that 23-year-old Lelaina has things together as much as 18-year-old Tracie thought Lelaina had things together.
yeah, yeah.
So, and that's okay. But
Mhm,
I'd like to dig into it a little bit.
mhm,
So there are some surface level things that in the intervening 30 years, like just kind of are unpleasant on screen that I'll name. And then there are two kind of big things that I want to unpack in the movie, and that's sort of the idea of selling out versus like
mhm,
being pure to your artistic vision,
mhm,
and the love triangle that you identified between Ethan Hawke's Troy and Ben Stiller's Michael. And then in a meta level, I want to talk about the erasure of female creators a little bit, especially as it comes to actually that My Sharona scene. So those are the things that I'm going to get into. But first, let me give a quick recap of the plot, such as it is. It's not huge, like not a lot happens, but
it's kind of a slice of life sort of
a little bit. I mean, there is
story,
some
yeah.
plot, but so we meet Lelaina and her friends. Lelaina, Winona Ryder's character, is an aspiring documentarian, and so the very first thing we are very clearly shown that this is a videotape. Like we see the word VCR, and it's kind of grainy, and it's her giving the valedictorian speech. She is missing a card, and so like the punchline is missing from her speech. And then we see them kind of her and her friends kind of goofing off. So it's Winona Ryder's Lelaina. Then there's Janine Garofalo's Vickie, Ethan Hawke's Troy, and then Steve Zahn's Sammy. Those are sort of the core friend group that we follow, partially from behind Lainey's camera and partially sort of in the like third person omniscient movie. So we immediately learn that Lainey's parents are divorced and there's a lot of tension. They're all out to dinner. Ethan Hawke's Troy is a best friend, but not a boyfriend. Lainey works for a morning show with the guy that played the dad from Frasier
Mhm,
as the morning show host. He's a dick, but he
mhm,
plays this like very charming like guy on the show. It's Lainey's job to write his script on little note cards, kind of like the ones she used on her speech. And there's some tension there because like he thinks she should be like also making his coffee, which she doesn't want to do. So we get a little bit of like discomfort there. Vickie works at the Gap. Troy works in a little like newsstand. Troy immediately gets fired for stealing a Snickers and moves in with Lainey and Vickie. Lelaina and Vickie are out in the car and have this little meet cute with Ben Stiller's Michael because Lelaina throws a lit cigarette out the window. It lands in his convertible and sort of starts a fire, like smoking on something that's on his passenger seat, and he ends up hitting her car, which was a hand-me-down from her stepmother.
Oh, and her father gives her a gas credit card in that first scene,
Yes.
doesn't he? Yeah.
Yes, he does.
So that her gas is covered for the year,
A
something
year.
like that. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So we meet Michael. He's about their age, a little bit older, but not much. So still mid 20s. And he has kind of a high powered job at an MTV like network called In Your
Mhm.
Face.
Mhm.
And we are shown pretty early how ridiculous this network is when there's an influencer personality who Lainey's watching it on the TV, and she's doing an ad for this like designer scarf that has the colors of the Bloods and the Crips, and it's only $75. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous, and it's
No
completely
memory of that part.
it's like
Okay.
it's like 30 seconds, but it's
Yeah.
the point was to sort of lampoon this
Mhm.
this
Mhm.
network, this MTV style network. Okay, Lainey's immediate boss, we don't actually get to know this person, but he shows the host of the show Lainey's documentary footage and says, I think she's really talented. Lainey's out, just outside listening. So she's
Mhm.
eavesdropping on this. The immediate boss is like, I think she's really talented. I'd love to show this. And the guy's like, no, I don't know. We only do sunny stuff, not this broody shit. And I want you to get rid of her. I don't like her pointy face. And like, he
He's a
insults her.
complete dick. Yeah.
Yeah, she can hear him, he doesn't know she can hear him, so she ends up sort of retaliating by putting, since she writes his cards
Mhm.
for his script, he doesn't review them in advance, so he goes on camera and says, I've always liked very, very young girls, because that's what it says on his card. And then
God.
he's like, and he flips to the next card, and he's talking to an author at this point, and he says,
Yeah.
being a total prick, like that's on his card as well. So Lainey loses her job.
Yeah, as she should.
So she has a little bit of a crisis. Ethan Hawke's Troy kind of tries to comfort her because he's been fired from like 13 jobs or something. And this is all we need, Lainey. A couple of cigarettes, good conversation in you and me. And then he tries to kiss her. She's like, no, I can't do this because I can't lose you. And then he gives her the cold shoulder. Meanwhile, she starts dating Michael, Ben Stiller's Michael. And Michael is a little awkward, a little silly, but like a nice guy.
Mhm.
They have a nice time together. He clearly really, really likes her. We get a line in their first date that at the time in 94, I thought was hilarious. It, it's not that funny now, but they're talking and he says something like, you're really beautiful. Like really, really, I can't believe how, like he's falling over himself about how good looking she is. And she's uncomfortable. So to change the subject, she's like, are you religious at all? Which feels like a really weird non sequitur looking back on it. He says, oh, well, I guess you could say I'm a non practicing Jew. And she says, well, I guess you could say I'm a non practicing virgin. And then they just look at each other in like uncomfortable awkwardness. So the rivalry between Michael, who is emotionally available, has a steady job, doesn't mind telling her that at one point he actually says he loves her and then is
Mhm.
like, oh, wait, what? You're amazing. Like in the same breath, he says, I
Mhm.
think you're
Mhm.
amazing and I
Mhm.
love you. Whereas Ethan Hawke's Troy, like at one point is like, I'm totally in love with you. That's what you want me to say, isn't it? Don't flatter yourself. Like he's so mean to her
Mhm. Mhm.
over and over and over again. He's so mean to her. The real denouement, if there is one, is that Michael shows Lainey's videos to his bosses and they like it. They want to
Mhm.
buy it. And she was just about to sell plasma, like she's like has no money. In fact, the gas card comes back because she can't pay rent. And so her dad had given her a gas card. She tries to get a job, lots of different places, is told she's overqualified. She can't find a job. She even tries to get a job at like Wiener Schnitzel, like a drive-through hot dog place. And the manager is like, there's a reason I've been here 6 months. Like she she can't get a job at the hot dog place. And she asks each of her parents for a loan. Both of them deny her. So she starts using the gas card creatively and like paying for people's gas, and they give her cash. And then Michael says he can sell her video or her movie to his people, and to make a show out of it. And she's super excited, and it's amazing. And then they go to the movie. There's some, growling at one another between Ethan Hawke and Ben Stiller, but they go to the premiere. He says, I haven't seen it yet. She hasn't seen their edits, and they show the edits. And we've been watching the documentary footage throughout, and it's like grainy and not particularly well composed and brooding and very serious. And it has been spliced up MTV style with lots of animation and like quick cuts. And
I
Lainey hates
kind of
it.
remember there being like sound effects too, like spraying type sound effects. Am I misremembering that or?
There was a soundtrack. I don't,
Oh, okay. Okay.
and there was product placement.
Mm-hmm.
So like at one point from the raw footage, they were like, pizza's a good idea. And so it's like all of them, like quick cuts, pizza, pizza, pizza. And then you see like Pizza Hut, and it's like animated with like
Mm-hmm.
not drawn, but like
Okay.
cutouts. And
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
she is just devastated by this. Like, this is not mine. And runs away. And Michael is like, I didn't know they would do it. I didn't see it. I'll make them take the pizza bit out. And we're meant to think like he just doesn't get it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So she's really devastated by this, just having a moment when Troy comes upon her kind of wallowing. And that's when she says, I really thought that I was going to do something by the time I was 23.
Mm-hmm.
They finally do get together. They have sex. The sex scene is like real close up of their faces and sort of like, we could have been doing this all along. Like, you're my best friend. But then he bails super early in the morning, like just runs away. So the next day, he's in a band called Hey, That's My Bike.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
So the next day, or a couple of days later, they're at the bar where Hey, That's My Bike performs, and Michael shows up, and he has two plane tickets to go to New York. He wants her to go with him to pitch her show the way she wants to do it to his
Mm-hmm.
bosses.
Mm-hmm.
And Troy is, growling and jealous. And Lainey kind of pulls Troy aside and is like, what is happening? You ran away. And he is like, sometimes I'm going to do things that you don't like. And that's just how it is. And she runs away from both of them.
Mm-hmm.
They have a moment in the street where Ben Stiller says, you're like the court jester. And, Hamlet finds his skull and he died alone. And like, yeah, people say, yeah, he was funny. But Troy says, everybody dies alone. Michael says, if you really believe that, who are you looking for out here? Michael throws down the plane tickets into the street.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next scene, we see Troy getting on a plane. And so initially you're almost thinking like he took the tickets off the street, but no, it turns out his father died and he went home to wherever home is for the funeral. He was fairly estranged from his dad. And Lelaina is just missing him. She's just absolutely pining for him and is just about to run out of her apartment to go look for him. Sammy tells her that he went home. So she's just about to try and like, I don't know, but go look for him, and a cab pulls up and drops him off, and they, apologize, and the movie ends with them in each other's arms. So that's the basic plot. So the quick things. Bechdel test, yes, flying colors. Lelaina and Vickie talk about lots of stuff, not just
Mm-hmm.
boys. Race, I counted 2 Black actors in the whole movie. There's the author that the dick boss is talking to when he
Mm-hmm.
gets the cards. And then when Lainey's trying to get a job, she starts with radio, and the would-be boss is a Black man who says, I trust my gut, and my gut says this is a bad fit. And that's it. There's also just sort of surface level, like the characters, like all of them smoke like chimneys, which is,
Really? Oh gosh, I had no memory of that.
yeah, like Lainey always has a cigarette in her hand the
Okay.
whole movie.
I kind of remembered that Ethan Hawke smoked, but I did not remember
Yeah,
that
no,
Lainey
that's
did
how she
too.
meets Michael, because she like flicks her
Oh,
still
that's
lit.
right. That's right. That's right. That's right. Okay.
Yeah,
'Cause when I remember it, I just remember that he hit her car. That's all I remember
because
about it.
because of
Yeah.
the
But
cigarette.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, they show the passage of time with the cigarette butts building up in the ashtray at
Mm,
one point,
okay. Okay.
which is like really, it's what's the word? It's surprising
Hmm.
because TV today, you really don't see cigarettes at all,
Yeah.
or movies,
Yeah.
or very rarely.
Unless
There's
they're set in a specific time period. But even
like,
then, like I just recently watched Chinatown again with my husband,
uh-huh.
and I was thinking about how many cigarettes there are, which is perfectly in keeping with the time that it's set in. But it also felt like a different choice. Like they would have had cigarettes once in a while if they made it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, go ahead.
And then the other thing that stood out to me in this rewatch is the frequency and casualness with which they use the ableist R word. It just
Hmm.
shows up again and again. So those are a couple of like surface things that, kind of, well, that I noticed, just easy to check off quickly.
Hmm. Hmm.
Also, queer representation. So we have Sammy, who's like a part of this friend group, but not, like he is and isn't. And there's actually some not insignificant amount of screen time devoted to his coming out, or why he's still in the closet, and those sorts of
Hmm.
things about his
Hmm.
relationship with his family, which is actually, for 30 years ago, I think was well done. The two big things that I want to talk about are related. So let's talk about selling out first.
Mm.
At one point, when Lainey's trying to get a job at a newspaper, because she's like, I'm a journalist, so like, and the woman who is her would-be boss is like, I just don't see it. And then the woman, she says, define irony,
Mm. Hmm.
and Lainey can't. And then she comes to a diner and finds Troy, and he does without
Hmm.
hesitation, which is another way that the movie makers prove to us that he's smart. But there's something like, I'm not sure irony is the right word. It it's almost like hypocrisy about
Hmm.
this movie, that there's some weird tension for me that's all about lampooning sellouts from a major motion picture. From a
Yeah.
major motion picture, from a major house. Like, it's not like
Hmm.
this it was like they wanted it to feel indie, but it wasn't.
Hmm. Hmm.
And there's something like alive in that tension that feels actually like the tension of Gen X. There are folks like, you identify this as a Gen X movie. I think you're right. Like, this is
Hmm.
this is solidly Gen X. It could only have been written by a Gen Xer, you know.
So just this morning, I was asked to answer some questions for an article or for something coming out, because I wrote an article about Gen X retirements. And so they reached out to me, said, will you answer some questions? And so I did a little bit of research. And like when you type in Gen X retirement, one of the articles that I pulled up for research, the image they had was from Reality Bites.
Yeah.
So
Well, I was reading this morning, like, I don't even think we had that term yet when this
mhm.
movie was made. They were still calling us baby busters because there were so few of
Oh
us as
gosh, I
baby
had
boomers kids.
forgotten that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's something like complicated, and it feels potentially toxic when I look back
Hmm.
on it. This lampooning of selling out being sold to me in
Hmm.
this major motion picture that had a lot of product placement, which maybe was ironic.
Hmm.
Maybe. I don't, I mean, it was certainly like meant to be, it was very obvious within the MTV version, or the in your face version
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
Lainey's video, but it's throughout the
Hmm.
movie. Like, she talks about how important a big gulp is to her. And
Hmm. Hmm. And Troy says like quarter pounders are something worth getting up for.
yeah, yeah, there's McDonald's, there's Diet
Hmm.
Coke, there's a lot of like product placement in this movie.
Hmm.
And it just feels potentially toxic or easily twisted in
Hmm.
a way that actually feels very similar
Hmm.
to, and is related. It's resonant with the so-called choice between these two men, right? So Michael represents selling out, and Troy represents staying true to your so-called artistic vision. And the filmmakers, I mean, like you and I both, and I think, a lot of us watching, like we got the message Ethan Hawke was the guy.
Mm-hmm.
He was the one. She chose correctly.
Mm-hmm.
But did she?
Mm-mm.
I mean, this dude was mean to her, which he suggests is him being true to his artistic vision, like him being true to himself somehow,
Mm-hmm.
being mean to her, unpredictable, unreliable, no job, no ambition, or afraid of ambition. Like there is this judgment of materialism, which gets conflated with a judgment of anything other than sitting around and brooding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting within the universe of the movie is Michael knows it, right? He's trying to convince Lainey that he's not materialistic. He
Mm-hmm.
doesn't care that much about stuff. And she's like, look at you, like in your designer suits and whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Couple of things that I think are interesting here. One is I feel like Gen X as a generation, as a group of people, is uniquely concerned about selling out. Like, I think that happened in earlier generations. I'm sure it's happened in later generations. I have a theory as to why that is. And it's the 80s being Gen X's formative years, where everything was slick and money and sell, and greed is good and all of that. And so that's like the rejection of that culture. So I think that that's really interesting. The issue is that there is no actual alternative. It's you either sell out or you stay true to your artistic vision. But what does that mean? How do you get your art to the people who will appreciate it? Because there is no alternative offered. And that is, well, I mean, that's the way madness lies. And then that also means you get people who just sit around brooding without actually writing something or creating something or doing anything.
I think I'd push it even further. The alternative that's offered is suffering. And if you're
Mm-hmm.
not suffering, you're somehow
Yeah.
not, then you're selling out.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
suffer or sell out. And like, what a shitty choice.
Yeah.
And that is the choice that Lainey's given. Suffer
Yeah.
with this good looking friend who,
Treats you badly.
yeah, or sell out with this guy who actually cares about you, can say he cares about you, has money, has a job, is reliable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we're told clearly that the suffering is the right choice.
Yeah. Yeah. Something else that just came up to me that I mentioned last night when we were talking, I, for all of my life, have had this sense that there's a ticking clock, that I have to do or create something remarkable when I am young. And until recently, I had never really like wrestled with it or examined it. It just was. And I realized that ticking clock was about my own attractiveness and my sense that I can only do or create something remarkable while I am conventionally attractive. And to further, because the people who decide that something remarkable has been done are men.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, that's effed up. I mean, like I'm really not okay with that being in my head. However, Lainey saying I thought I'd be somebody by the time I was 23 fits in with that. That's part of the reason why that resonated with me, is because I, even as a 15-year-old watching this movie, I felt that ticking clock, because I need to do this when I am some pretty young thing. And having that in my head, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who has that in my head. Like I have it in that very specific way, but I didn't know it was there until I really like wrestled with it. Makes Michael's offer at the end feel a little different, in that, like, just objectively, if we take how women are socialized in 20th century and now 21st century America out of it, if this is just, like Aliens. Obviously, Michael's the right choice. In this context, I know I would feel awkward about the fact that I got my big break because I was sleeping with a guy. There's so much tangled up in there. And then it's also the fact that like I can say that I'd feel weird about it, but the thing is like that's how things work. You know people. You know people who know people. And they're like, "Hey, I can get this to my boss." And that's how it works. And she was doing that with like her boss at the morning show. So I don't know if Lainey would have a problem with it. I would. And that like all of that, I wonder how much art we've missed out on because people aren't willing to sell out. Like
Yeah.
my writing career, when I first started it, I started freelancing just to get some money coming in. And I just happened to get a money blog as one of my first clients who liked my work, passed my name along to friends. 8 months later, 10 months later, I'm getting to be known as a money writer and was invited to a financial media conference. And I almost didn't go because I was like, well, I don't want to be a money. I mean, like I'm supposed to be a novelist. Like I'm supposed to be a real writer. And about 6 weeks before the conference, I woke up in the middle of the night going like, people want to pay me to write. What is wrong with me? Like, why am I saying no to this? And like, what vision am I hewing to that I could do more easily by not embracing this opportunity? And so like, that's this really weird push pull that I think is not, it's not just this movie. This movie like describes it, but I think that is, I mean, what was the name of the author? Helen
Childress.
Childress. She experienced it. I mean, like, this is
Yeah.
something that is common in our generation. But wow, I feel like there's a lot that we've missed out on because people are like, well, no, that's not pure enough. That would be selling out.
It's interesting that irony, so just define irony. She can't, but she knows it when she sees it. She asks Troy to define it. He says it's when the true meaning is the exact opposite of the literal meaning. I think that actually was a big old clue. That's a piece of exposition, I think, in Childress's script here that is related to what you're talking about. Because so Vickie, we see one of our first introductions to Vickie is a man sneaking out of her bedroom trying not to wake her. She was pretending to be asleep. The moment he's gone, she pulls out this little notebook and she writes down the date and his name with a question mark. She's not 100% sure she remembers it. He's number 66 in this book of lovers.
Conquests. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a conversation that she and Lainey have later where, she says they run away immediately. Like, I'm not the kind of girl who has a relationship. Those aren't her words. I'm paraphrasing. And Lainey's like, what are you talking about? You're out the door before he even takes the condom off. And it's made clear in that moment, like she says something like, I'm just doing it before they do it to me. So the irony of, this casual sex and that's what she wants is casual sex. What she really wants is relationship. But then there's this fear. It's this fear, this resistance to selling out is like a fear of success. And I think that part of what is uncomfortable to me watching this movie now 30 years later is that I'm like, oh, that fear of success is so old, I don't even recognize it. And I put the clothes on it of, I'm not selling out. I'm not going to sell out, and that's just like, I mean, I guess I'm glad I know it's in my head, but
and I do think it's telling that Helen Childress, was herself a filmmaker, and she based this.
This is very autobiographical.
Yes.
In fact, there's actually a man named Troy Dyer who sued her for using his name. Apparently, he's more like the Michael character, but it's settled out of court.
I find it telling because, a lot of this is about the pain of being a creator, because what you're able to actually put on the page or on the screen never fits what's in your head. So there's already this pain of selling out just in the act of creation. And I can recall, I think it was something Elizabeth Gilbert was writing about, where she was talking about how she'd written this piece, short fiction, and it was not long, it was like 5,000 words. And it was something prestigious said, we'll take it, but you need to get it down to like under 2,000 words, which is like, so the bulk of the story. And she was just like, I've never treated my stories so roughly. And she was mentioning this to, I think it was a boyfriend of hers or something, who was like, oh, I would never do that. I would never. Like, because Elizabeth Gilbert is not above petty, she's like, and he's never been published. But that is like, this film has like made that fear of creation, fear of success, because it's not the ideal that we want. It's made it real in a way that resonates with people who aren't creators as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
In some ways that's a shame. In some ways I think that's partially like that's human nature. And in some ways I think, like I said, I think Gen X was primed to reject the values and the materialism and the expectations of the previous generation, particularly because it lived through the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of creators and that gap between what's in your head and what gets put on the screen, something really interesting happened with this movie that you named that My Sharona scene. So there's a scene, they're in the gas station, My Sharona comes on the radio, Vickie says, oh, turn it up, you won't be sorry. The gas station attendant turns it up, it's My Sharona, and Vickie and Lelaina and Sammy all dance, and
Mhm.
Troy just smirks. And then you kind of, the camera cuts to outside, you can still hear the music, and it's like this beautiful sunset, and they're dancing. It's a really visually beautiful scene.
Mhm.
And looking back on it, looking back on the movie, the 25th anniversary, like people were talking about that. And I don't remember who, but one of the producers was like, yeah, that was really Ben's vision. Ben Stiller was the director of this movie in addition to playing
Mhm.
Michael. And Childress wrote that scene exactly in the script. It says, and then pan out and the whatever. And I read this in, there's an article in the Atlantic about the movie that I'll link to in the show notes, although it is behind the paywall, so sorry. But the author points out that this female creator who wrote a story about her life had to prove that she wrote it, that it was hers. She had to prove that it was hers, because people are giving Ben Stiller the credit for this
Mhm.
scene, which is sort of the iconic scene of
Mhm.
this, or an iconic scene from this iconic Gen X movie, that Childress
Mhm.
had to be like, no, I wrote that. That was mine. Like she had
Mhm.
to like pull out the script book to
Wow.
be like, that's not Ben, that's me.
Yeah.
And there's something like so quintessential about that need to reclaim. I mean, this is an autobiographical film that she
Yeah.
had to prove was hers
Yeah.
once,
Yeah.
at least for the moment that like captured culture's imagination.
Mhm.
And there's something like that just further layers the problematics and the like awkwardness and the like
Mhm.
pressure on this notion of selling out
Mhm.
and artistic vision and being true to one's identity when you layer that piece of it onto it as well,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And it's like there's all these layers of meta, right? Because one of the things that Lainey says that she wants to do is she's telling these stories about her friends who are trying to find their own identities without real role models or heroes. Like that's what she
Mhm.
says about herself and her friends. And so this notion of like trying to find your identity and then also needing to defend it, being afraid of it,
Mhm.
like also like needing to pay rent.
You know, it's interesting the erasure of Helen Childress's like creation of that iconic moment, which is horrifying. But I feel like that gets to something I mentioned last week, which is that when it comes to like iconic women and non men creators, we have this tendency to act like they have no influences. And then one of the ways that we do that is by erasing the women from the stuff that they did. So like, oh yeah, that's Ben's movie. Now I probably knew at some point that Ben Stiller directed this. It was one of those, like, I read it this morning and I
It was
wasn't
his
surprised.
first. It was his
Yeah, yeah.
directorial debut. Mm-hmm.
And so like I knew it at some point, but it's not, I don't associate, like, to me this is, when I think about it, it's Winona Ryder and Janine Garofalo's movie, and that's what I remember from that scene. That was also, that's not the first time I heard My Sharona, but that movie's how I learned to appreciate that song. But that is like, I know Sammy is there also dancing and Troy is there and not dancing, but in my head, what I remember are the two women dancing together. And so like this scene written by a woman in a song about a woman, because Sharona's a real person, with like two iconic Gen X women actors dancing. And they go, yeah, that's Ben. That's effing infuriating. Because one of the reasons why that scene is remembered and why it's iconic is because it gave me the sense that joy is always available, even among these extremely stressful situations.
Yes. And also there was, because of Troy's smirk and the boomer attendant who actually did the turning up of the volume, who's just like giving them like this, it's not exactly judgmental. Like he's not like, it is judgmental, but in a sort of, what are you doing, as opposed to,
It's more like kids these days, isn't it?
Yeah. And not an anger, I guess is what I'm trying to say, but just a lack of understanding.
Yeah.
And I think that subversion of decorum, as if you need to have decorum in a food mart at a gas station, but
Yeah.
still they are in public, and they just, break out dancing. So joy is always available, even in sort of stressful times. And also like that, the notion of decorum in public, if joy is on the table, it is rejected. And I think that's also a piece of that is beautiful.
Well, and it's the other thing that I appreciate about it is that it pushes back against the Troys of the world who think that optimism and hope and joy are uncool.
Yes. Because there is nobody cooler than Vickie and Lelaina when they're dancing to My Sharona.
Yes. Yeah. For that interview I did this morning, one of the things I said, what I love about Gen X is also what people were critical of Gen X about, especially when they were in teens and 20s, is they're disaffected. It's like the disaffected youth. And so like what that means is they are not looking to any institutions to take care of them or protect them or save them. That leads to like, incredible independence. I mean, like, this is the latchkey generation. The visual of Vickie using toilet paper as the coffee filter.
It was Lainey, actually, but yeah.
That was Lainey. Oh gosh, for some reason in my head it was Vickie. Well, in any case, the visual has stuck with me because it was just like, oh, you find a way. You find a way to make it work. Same with her gas station scheme. Like, I really don't think that was okay what she was doing, but she was providing a service. Like, she wasn't just taking the money, she was pumping gas for people.
Yeah, she didn't steal from anybody except her dad, which wasn't exactly, I mean, like, moment when he's like, sorry, sunshine, you're gonna have to figure out your way out of this. Like, it really hurts.
I'll figure. Yeah.
Because he implies that she's somehow lazy.
Yes.
And she has been, I mean, it was maybe not the wisest thing to burn the bridge with Good Morning Grant before she had something else lined up. She could have lined something else up and then burned the bridge. But whatever. She does eventually sit on her couch and talk to the 1-900 psychic line for hours and hours and hours. But that's after both of her parents turn her down for loans. And her dad, they make it clear dad's got plenty of money. It's not that he doesn't have it.
Mhm.
he's unwilling to help at this
He
point.
thinks that she needs to learn a lesson or
He's
something.
trying to teach her a lesson. And we know that like she doesn't actually need that lesson. Like this kid, because she is a kid, is really hardworking and trying really, really hard. Maybe takes herself a little too seriously, but you know, we all
Who
did when we were
didn't?
23. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sort of goes with the territory of being 23. So, yeah.
It's interesting just thinking about our Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or Willy Wonka, where Charlie is seen to be pure of heart because he gives the everlasting gobstopper back. And like that's what I imbibed, and I very much am like I'm a black and white thinker, and you know I'm a rule follower. So like even watching it, it made me uncomfortable that she did that to her dad's money. But at the same time, I was also just like, man, that guy sucks. And like I admired the hustle. I admired the creativity of it because in addition, like that's since they were doing their grocery shopping at the gas station because she had the gas card. So like I admired the creativity of that because that was not what her dad intended it to do. That was she was being a subversive bitch. For those who don't know, the greatest compliment Tracie ever gave me was telling me I was a subversive bitch.
She wants it on her gravestone.
I
For reals.
do. I do. The notorious EGB, subversive bitch. So like I really admire that. I also, considering that level of self-actualization, like creativity, DIY, like the like, all right, I'm counting on myself. I also comprehend not trusting Michael's offer.
Yeah.
In
Yes.
in that I would have made the exact same decision at 23.
Yeah. Probably.
Even without having seen this movie or you know whatever, but just like I'm sorry, you want to do what now with how much money? That can't be right. What's the
Yeah.
catch?
Okay. One final tidbit, and then I'm gonna try and wrap us up. So the other thing that I think is really interesting within the context of the conversation about the difference between selling out and artistic vision, reality bites doesn't mean what we think it means. Like we all think it means reality sucks. That's not what she meant. That was the time of when we were first starting to talk about sound bites. She meant bite-sized pieces of reality. Your face. You should close your mouth. You're going to catch some flies. I read it
You
this
just
morning in
blew
that,
my mind.
right? I read it this morning in that Atlantic article that Childress was like, yeah, it was we had sound bites was like a new concept in, you know, in the early 90s. And that's what I was thinking of. Like that's what the MTV thing turns it into, is like reality
Bites reality. Yeah.
as opposed to, yeah, it's a noun, it's not a verb.
Wow.
And reality is a adjective. Anyway,
Yeah.
so that's just a little tidbit actually that I wanted to make sure that I shared because I read it this morning. I was like, oh, huh, nope. It's become a thing. You know, she was
Yeah.
saying, Childress was interviewed for this Atlantic article and she was saying like, yeah, I just saw it like on CNN, like reality bites Trump or reality bites, you know, like it's
Mhm.
like a thing. It's become a
Mhm.
phrase that we use, but it's not the way she intended.
Well, it's interesting because that also changes in some ways the meaning of the movie. Because if it ends with the idea that you sell out or you suffer, like well, live in
Reality sucks.
reality and reality bites.
Yeah. No, it was a
Wow.
descriptor of what she was giving
Wow.
us. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. So we've been talking for a long minute, so I'm gonna try and see if I can like give the highlights. So 1994 Reality Bites passes the Bechdel test, no problem. Very little racial diversity. The ultimate duality that we are given, which has multiple layers, is between selling out and suffering. And suffering is made to be appealing because that is being true. That's being pure to who you are and to your art. And these 30 years later, I question the dichotomy at all. I think there are more options. And also, even within the dichotomy, I question whether or not suffering is actually the right choice.
Well, it also it makes a suggestion that the artist is solitary because like then editing would be selling out. like the story I told about Elizabeth Gilbert, like the idea that like you have one singular vision and how dare anyone question it,
Yeah.
which is very damaging. It's a very damaging view of art.
Right. It leads to within the movie, and I think, the ripple effect, it leads to us being dishonest with ourselves about what we actually want in a protective move. So there's a fear of failure, which actually becomes a fear of success.
It's a
That,
fear of vulnerability, kind of, because
yeah,
that's
I think
because you
all
have
of
to be,
those,
yeah, you have to be
all
vulnerable
of
to
those things.
fail, and you can't succeed unless you are vulnerable.
And the relation between the art and romantic entanglements it's there in this film over and over and over again, that there's a romantic metaphor perhaps
Hmm.
between those things, and we see it in Michael and Troy, but we also see it in Vickie's constant sleep, her promiscuity, if I may
Hmm.
call it that, that
That
she
doesn't
is
make her happy.
doesn't make her happy at all, and she uses it as a way to avoid the fear of rejection that is
Hmm.
driving her.
Hmm.
We also talked at the sort of meta level about that, this film gave us these strong female protagonists who I very much identified with whom I very much identified. And that makes sense because it came from a female creator who herself then becomes erased when
Hmm.
her creation becomes beloved by lots of people.
Hmm.
So, in that sense, the lampooning of selling out is sort of accurate, right?
Hmm.
Because she, once she sold out, it's not that she lost her vision, she lost her identity as its creator, which is
Hmm.
like blowing my mind a little bit.
Hmm.
I blame that on sexism, not on selling out, though.
No, yeah, that's sexism. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are the big pieces that I hope that we kind of covered. Did I miss anything that you want to make sure that you name?
One thing we talked about before we started recording was with the raw footage, and
Oh,
how a lot of Lainey's footage that we see does not seem that compelling.
yeah.
And looking back on it, and again, I haven't seen it since I myself was probably 23, but looking back on it, it really feels like she thinks she has to be complete at age 23, and she thinks that that her art is at its pinnacle when she's still very much a zygote. An
Yeah.
artistic zygote. And so
Yeah.
there's some of the footage, there's two scenes in particular that we talk about. There's one where Vickie is getting her test results for an AIDS test, and it's devastating. It's just devastating. And if I recall correctly, isn't Vickie like, no, she doesn't get a negative test result,
She does
but
get a
the
negative
waiting.
test result. Well,
I mean,
well,
yeah, I mean, she doesn't get a positive test result.
right.
Yeah, she doesn't get a
The
positive
waiting
test
is
result,
very hard.
but the waiting is
She's
the devastating part.
Yeah, at one point she says, "Here I am, maybe probably dying of AIDS." Like she's terrified. She's terrified.
Yeah, terrified. And like that's when I say that scene is devastating, it's like I just feeling for that character, and layered on top of the way that she conducts her romantic life being because of a fear of rejection. And like it's just it's amazing. It's fantastic filmmaking and fantastic documentary making in context. The other one is Sammy is thinking of coming out to his parents. And so he talks to Vickie as if Vickie is his mother, like they do a role play of how it would go. And that is another lovely scene where Vickie puts on this funny, like Midwestern, like, "Oh, my child, I love you. I will join P Flag." And what really stuck with me about that scene is that it's showing his friends are supporting him by doing this, like this role play, because it's got to be terrifying to do that, especially in the early mid 90s, but also goofing around a little bit. So like it's just it's such good friendship right there. It does speak to Lainey's skill as a documentarian, and tells me that, like, 15 years, 20 years in the future, she'd be making amazing films, but she
Yeah.
needs
I
to
mean,
cook a little longer.
yeah, maybe. I mean, I think it really, all of the friendships in this, the friendships in this film feel real.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
fight and they make up and they feel real and genuine and like authentic connections. I say maybe about Lainey's filmmaking. Roger Ebert, in his contemporaneous review, was like, she's not a good filmmaker. The composition is bad. The pacing is wrong. Like he really didn't like.
Yeah.
He
And
liked
he
the
would know.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so that's why I hesitated. Like, I don't watch nearly as many films as Roger Ebert did. We also have very different perspectives about what we care about. So
Hmm.
there's that. But I do think there's, well, it just took itself too seriously, I think,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
again, 23.
23.
So
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So wow, we've been talking a long time.
So next time, now I know we usually go back and forth, but I'm going to be doing a bonus episode about Back to the Future. So you are coming back for our next regular episode. What do you have for me next time?
Yeah, I am going to bring you Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Oh, like the Knights Who Say.
Exactly. Yeah. Do you have reader comments for us
I
today?
do. I do have a couple of reader comments. Here we go. So, got a couple of comments about Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory from Kiara. She said, I think Timothy Chalamet's Wonka had the same joy and energy of Wilder's, and I think it's an instant classic addition to the story. So, and she recommended that we go see it. So I was like, okay, that makes me feel good. Just because Johnny Depp's Wonka left such a bad taste in my mouth. Although I was thinking about the fact that, like, if you think about it, in some ways, Johnny Depp was really just showing what was screwed up about this character. It's just like, yeah, but is that why we go to the movies? I don't know. And then David said, in response to my saying, come with me and you'll be in a world of capitalistic monopolies. Unregulated monopolies is how I put it. So I posted that, and David said, aren't we already? I'm like, yeah, way to break down the vibe. And then I have one more from Lisa on Clue, who said that to this day, whenever my family members are angry, we yell, flames, flames on the side of my face, Madeline Kahn style, because iconic.
Well, listener, if you have deep thoughts from our deep thoughts, we would love to hear them for reals. So you can click the link in our show notes to go to our listener forum to share them with us. Email us at guygirlsmedia@gmail.com or find us on socials and let us know there.
Mm-hmm. We'd love to hear from you.
All right. Until next time.
Till next time.
Do you like stickers? Sure, we all do. If you head over to guygirlsmedia.com/sign up and share your address with us, we'll send you a sticker. It really is that easy. But don't wait, there's a limited quantity. Thanks for listening. Our theme music is Professor Umlaut by Kevin MacLeod from Incompetech.com. Find full music credits in the show notes. Until next time, remember, pop culture is still culture. And shouldn't you know what's in your head?